Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman, and I'm thrilled to have you joining us today on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those who are wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we will be taking different life cycles and we're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because personal finances are usually not about the money. If you can believe it, it's really actually about the emotions that are associated with your finances. Although we may be fairly general in our discussion, we'd love to hear from you to make it more relevant and more personal. So you can call in or you can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Or if you want, you can post comments and questions on Facebook or YouTube or wherever else you're listening, and we will address them and include you in the show. More than ever, having the right mindset is so important. People need to learn how to manage conflict in a healthy way and how to frame things in a positive manner. We are constantly bombarded with negative messages all the time when we're in our car, when we're in our home, wherever we are, and they take their toll on us. It's emotionally draining. It can be financially draining. And quite honestly, can just be toxic to have in your life. And since marketing is supposed to work more on the subliminal level, we don't always even know that it's happening and that it's being toxic to us. So today we're going to explore the topic of how mindset matters in your divorce. That's not a pipe dream, by the way. That's actually the goal. What you should be working towards. And it is a good thing that we have Catherine Blake joining us today. Kat is a child and family therapist. She is also a divorce coach, as well as having been covered by multiple media outlets and has some fantastic videos out there for you to find as well. Kat, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love everything that you just said about
I appreciate it. And through our discussions that we've had over time, I think we're very aligned in a lot of our thinking when it comes to divorce and your mindset and everything. So I'm very excited to have this show today, have you as a guest. It's taken too long to get you on, quite honestly. And I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about your background, because I think it's important. You come with an enormous amount of energy and very positive. And I'd love people to understand a little bit of your experience, but where that passion comes from as well.
Oh gosh, I mean, definitely how I ended up here today is a combination of personal and professional life. I mean, I started out as a child and family therapist. My very first job actually was working in the probation department with juveniles who were in and out of the court system. So I definitely learned about conflict. Working with divorced folks, things aren't so different from that. I trained in psychoanalysis in New York City. I had a private practice down there. And I, enjoyed learning how to provide therapy as a psychoanalyst. But I got to tell you, my personality is I like to see results and I like to see them quickly. I'm a little bit too impatient for that model. And so I started moving more towards coaching, and I really got on board with cognitive behavioral therapy, and then in turn getting more into NLP work and mindset coaching. And what I see is that style of providing services for a client just produces results in a much more timely manner. I think I used to specialize in working with anxiety in children. So often those children that were coming in with anxiety, I would find that divorce was somewhere on the horizon for the families. And to sit there and analyze why these kids are feeling anxious was really not helpful for them when they're, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and they're in a lot of pain. But the coaching and the coping and the really unpacking the mindset was really what helped them the most. And so I started to use that framework a lot. I was subpoenaed for a couple of custody cases that were high conflict. And then 11 years ago, I went through my own high conflict divorce. I went through a very lengthy custody battle with my ex. And got out the other end. I was a social worker, and I said, there's just got to be a different way. And I created this team up here. We called ourselves the D-Source team. The D-Source team has now been connected to the NADP, and we are a team of professionals, and we help people navigate their divorce and get through it with hopefully spending the least amount of money possible, but also get through it so they can keep their integrity and their ability to co-parent intact.
So just a couple things with that. You mentioned you worked with juveniles and then divorce and kids who are impacted by divorce. I think it's important that people understand that stress comes in different ways from different places. Having this mindset and what we're going to talk about today, I think, can help you in all of those areas. It doesn't have to be divorces. The tools and the things we're going to speak about are very adaptable. Just quickly for people to hear the NADP, I'm not even sure if we met through them or before, but the NADP is the National Association of Divorce Professionals, which is a wonderful resource as well for people if they're looking, if they're contemplating, or if they're in the middle of a divorce, to find the right professionals. We are both leaders of our chapters, and it's a great resource for people just to be able to get into. So you've kind of hinted a little bit at it, but what actually brought you from being a child and family psychotherapist to divorce coaching?
So, I mean, for me, my passion is just helping people navigate the divorce system. I think the system itself is truly broken. I think it's a black and white system that does not take into account past history, emotions, and really sadly, I think children are treated almost like an asset, right? They're treated like luggage that needs to be divvied up in the process. And so I, really switched gears after going through my own pretty horrible situation. So, I'll just share that 5 years post-divorce, I actually had published a book on codependency. And people were not really speaking about narcissism back then. When I was training in psychoanalysis, we didn't talk about narcissism because we were like, it's so rare, you're not going to run into it. And so after I published my book, my ex sued me, and I spent 2 years in and out of court.
Wow.
I lost everything. I lost my house, my finances, almost lost my child because there was definitely some parental alienation that was going on at the time. And, at the other end of it, I think what happened is my ex won an extra month of parenting time in the summer. So it was this incredibly emotionally draining, traumatizing, damaging situation that really nothing came out of it. I mean, I think him and I could have easily sat in a room and figured that out within an hour, when it came down to it, if somebody was helping us manage it in the right way, right?
Correct. No, absolutely.
And now that's really where my passion, I came out of that. I was, really emotionally devastated, but I was also angry. And like I said, I have that social worker background, and I was like, I'm going to change the system, and I'm going to help people navigate this so that they are not demolished in their process like I was.
So it's so interesting you talk about that. There's a few things with that. One is, if you go back even 5 years ago, as you were saying, there were so many less resources available.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, I went through my divorce 7 years ago. I've just hit that 7-year anniversary, if I can say that. Yeah. And there was so little available. You had your traditional attorney, and, so many of the things that we see now were kind of in the fledgling stage. And people really didn't recognize them or understand what they were. And it's what I call the new generation, not the next generation, but the new generation of divorce professionals, because there are so many of us that have been impacted by divorce, seen how broken the system is, and then look at it and say, well, I can help one person, I can help 100 people, whatever it is, through my career, I can really make a difference. And I think that power is ultimately going to help change it. But we need to band together this new generation, if I can say that.
Yes. I think one of the most amazing things that's happening right now too, when I divorced 11 years ago, is divorce was very taboo. There was no such thing as a divorce coach then. I hired an attorney because I just, my framework for divorce was watching, Kramer versus Kramer when I was a kid. I didn't even know you could do mediation.
Right.
I didn't know that there was different ways of getting through the legal process. But I think what's happening now is that people are speaking more about divorce, and it's taking the taboo away. And I think that's so lovely, because the more conversations we have, the more people share their narratives, the easier it is, I think, for people to navigate all of this, in a better way.
And I think it was, as you said, kind of taboo to talk about it. So support groups and looking at how do I grow? How do I relearn who I am? All those kind of things weren't happening in the way that they're happening now. Right. The other piece to it is, as you said, you were angry. I just got picked up on an article where they posed the question, what is the worst thing to spend money on? And I said, your emotions, because it's so easy. We hear about people who eat because of emotions, stress eaters. There are stress spenders. There are people that spend money on things that are unnecessary. And in a divorce, it's multiplied because you're scared about your finances. You're wanting, your pound of flesh sometimes if you've been hurt, whatever it might be. And it doesn't really ever get you that you're not vindicated.
Right.
You don't feel, see, I was right, I feel better. You just don't feel that. What you do feel is, I got less money in the bank.
Right.
Because you spent a ton of money doing that.
Right. I mean, what is that saying that most of the attorneys say? We know we've done a good job when neither party is satisfied.
Yes. That's exactly right.
We're turning one home into two. So,
right.
Parties do have to give up something. I think people start the divorce process with all these, again, mindset, these stereotypes in their head of what's going to happen. I think very frequently there's this hope that, well, this judge is going to look down and they're going to see how horrible my soon-to-be ex is, right?
Yeah.
They're going to put him and her in their place. They're going to see that I've been the harder working parent. And it's like, yeah, none of that actually is what's going to happen.
And the truth is, judges are people and they have different outcomes. You can have the exact same case presented to two different judges, not get the same outcome.
Absolutely.
And you lose control in the court system as opposed to being able to sit down and mediate and do it in a fashion where you can actually retain control. You can still say no and come to equal or better an outcome because you haven't spent an extra $50,000 or $60,000 through depositions in the courts and everything else that comes with that. So,
absolutely.
So I'm going to ask, mindset can, kind of be this evasive understanding. When you talk about mindset, what do you mean?
So when I educate my clients, I share this with them. There's events that happen in our life. I usually have a chart. And those events, we interpret them, right? So we usually have about 50 thoughts per minute. We're only typically aware of about 10% of our thinking. So the 90% is in our subconscious and it's floating around in there. And we're not even paying attention to it. So I always laugh. I'm like, we want people to pay attention to ourselves, but we don't even pay attention to ourselves, right? And then how you interpret an event is going to lead to your emotion, how you feel about it, and then how you behave and respond to it. So like I was saying before, when I was doing just general therapy, I was so fascinated. I mean, it was really something that, kind of jazzed me up, this idea that two people could be in the same exact situation. So for example, I worked with folks who had chronic medical conditions and they might have the same condition, the same prognosis, diagnosis, and they would interpret it wildly differently, right? And that would, so if somebody says, life is unfair, it's not fair I have this diagnosis, why did God do this to me? I give up, I don't want to go through this treatment. And then I have somebody the next hour who's like, I'm going to battle this, I'm in a support group, I'm traveling the world in a month, and that's really going to determine your outcome. It's going to be the difference even between surviving versus thriving. So when I started doing the work around divorce, I started to pay attention to my own mindset that was hindering me. And I laugh. Our mindset comes from our families. It comes from society. It comes from our personality. It comes from our moods. If you just win the lottery at 8 a.m., you're probably going to feel your acts a whole lot better at 10 a.m. than you would if you just had a normal morning, right?
Right.
So not only that, but our own interpretations are constantly evolving and changing. But divorce, I mean, there's so many mindsets that get people in trouble, like, stuck on, is this fair? The divorce process typically isn't fair, right?
Right. Absolutely.
I'm going to have my revenge. I'm going to have my kids full time because he or she never really took care. Like whatever it is, or if you have that catastrophic thinking, this is going to be terrible, I'm going to end up poor. I mean, all of these thoughts that are lurking around in there are definitely going to dictate how you get through the divorce process. And at the most basic level, all of us divorce coaches, like you were saying in the beginning, we're trying to help you sift through the emotions so you can make some really good logical decisions. So part of that is we need to unpack the thinking that's leading to some of these emotions that are driving you.
And you mentioned that there's about 50 thoughts a minute. Something that I actually, it made me think about is, and I'm going back about 10 or 12 years now, I read an article and it said the average person not only thinks about 50 thoughts a minute, but about 60% of those thoughts are in a negative format. So, for example, I couldn't run a 5K, or putting it in positive view is, if I trained, I could run a 5K. That's more positive, right? I might not be able to do it today, but I know I can do that. Yep. So what fascinated me with that was, if you think 55% of the time negatively, more than half you considered a positive person, because it's more than the average, or less than the average, I should say. But you're still thinking more often than not in a negative fashion. So the way that you frame things is so hugely important. You know, the way that you look at things, the way that you frame it, basically your mindset, if can impact pretty much everything you do. You look at it positively, you're going to probably have more positive outcome or have more positive action. So let's talk about that. How does mindset impact your journey through divorce? And using mindset, how do you heal a little bit more?
So there's a couple of things that I do want to point out. One is, I'm not doing positive psychology. So positive psychology is that no matter what happens, we think positive.
Right.
So I tend to think more in terms of, is this thought that you're repeatedly having, which then becomes a belief, is it helping or hindering you from reaching the person that you want to be? So that's really the way I frame it. I actually have my clients journal, and I have them do 2 journals. I call one the negative or the bitch journal, where you wake up every morning and you just write out all the junk, right? Because there is grief, there is anger. I'm not going to deny that any of that's there, but then we're going to open the second journal, and I am either giving specific prompts, but at the most basic level, it's like, write out 10 things you feel gratitude about, because what it does is, what we pay attention to expands. So I'm going to go, let's talk about money. I think a lot of folks, I know I was there, we get stuck in scarcity mindset, meaning I don't have enough. I don't have enough. I don't have what everybody else has. I'm always going to be behind the ball. I should be earning more money. And when we start thinking that way, it impedes our ability to earn more money, because we're psychologically kind of blocking that from coming to us, right?
Yeah, there's a book out there called Worthy that speaks about this exactly.
Yeah.
Understand your worth and charge it if you charge it by the hour, so to speak. Yeah.
Right. Or is it, am I truly as poor as I'm psychologically feeling? What do I have? What do I have to be gratitude about? What do I have that I have in abundance? And then the more you focus on that, usually the more we get. So I always use the example of, I know I'm a little all over the place, but I use the example of my car. So I was driving a white CRV car for many years. And when I drove it, I was like, everybody on the road has a white CRV car. I have the most common car ever.
Yeah.
And so when I traded my car in, they were like, I really was in a rush to get one. They're like, well, we have a black one on the lot. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to take the black one. Nobody has a black CRV. And literally that day I'm driving around, I'm like, everyone's got a black CRV. How did I not know this? It wasn't that those black CRVs weren't there. It's just that I wasn't paying attention to them. So they weren't in my realm. They weren't in my mental space. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. I can't remember what the concept is called, but there's research around that, that brings that to the forefront. And I think what I love about what you just said, by the way, is you giving space to the struggle that is real, right? I mean, I know that people go like hashtag the struggle's real kind of thing, but in this case, it really is. You're going through a difficult, sometimes broken system in a very emotional state. You're not sure of the outcome, which can be very scary. And you're giving credence to that. You're giving space to that, which is an important space. But at the same time, then you're saying to them, okay, now let's move forward. Now let's look at that positive. We're not pretending like it's not there. We're acknowledging it, but we're moving it forward in a positive way. And I really, really like the way that you do that. And we've got so much more to talk on this. We're going to take a break real quick. But before we do, Kat, how can people get in touch with you if they want to hear more, learn more, work with you?
So I offer, on my Facebook page, my personal page is open. It's Catherine Blake. It's just my name, and you'll see me. And that's where most of my clients come through Facebook. But also my website is www.catblakecdc.com, and that explains the different levels of services that I have in the programs.
And there's some great videos on there as well. One of them where you want to change divorce. One we're going to actually talk about a little bit after the break. But please do reach out. I encourage you to touch base with Kat, or at least go look at the website. There's a lot of great stuff on there. And we will be back in about 2 minutes.
Great.
Hello and welcome back to the Financial Wellness Hour. We are on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and our guest today is Catherine Blake. You can reach her at www.catblakecdc.com. And our topic today is Mindset Matters in Your Divorce. And I would say beyond your divorce, in any area of your life, really, your mindset can have a positive impact. I'm going to cover just a few things that we've spoken about already, because we speak about a lot of things pretty quickly. Sometimes we forget about them. It's nice to recap. So firstly, obviously, just Kat was kind enough to share her background and about her divorce a little bit and how she got to where she is, being a child and family psychotherapist to divorce coach. We spoke a little bit about what mindset is and how important it is to have a positive mindset and frame it in a positive way, but still to give that reverence, I guess, to the situation that you're going through, the impact that your mindset can have on your journey and how it helps you heal. And we spoke about a lot of different things. I'm not sure I got all of them down. I try to write them down, but I missed some. So we'll just keep going from there, I guess. But
talk a lot. I lived in New York. That's why.
There we go. So what does mindset coaching do for somebody trying to heal, let's say, from an emotional or an abusive marriage? And what are some of the kind of tricks and thoughts that you can maybe share on how somebody can change their mindset and help it become, a more positive mindset?
Absolutely. So like I was saying before, I'm a big believer in journaling, because I think we just get so busy in our life that we're not paying attention to what's going on here. And sometimes this is our biggest enemy, our thoughts. So it's just bringing awareness to some of the thoughts. And then I actually coach my clients on ways to challenge them, and sometimes that does come a little bit from CBT. It's like, what is the evidence for this? Do I have to think this way? What might my friend, how might he or she think of this same situation? What would I tell somebody else going through this situation? Because one really important step in healing from divorce is creating a narrative that's gentle to yourself. If your narrative is, my partner left me because I'm unlovable. If my narrative is, I'm a victim and I will always attract narcissists and abusers, like all of these thoughts, aside from the divorce agreement, the divorce paper, are going to go with you forward into your life. So we want to make sure that your narrative is one that's healing, gentle, and will help you become the person that you really want to be.
So it's interesting because I kind of tease a lot with people that I'm this cold, heartless MBA, CPA. But I used to think, and I've said this a lot on the show, I used to think things like self-care were, weird hippie things, that people did.
I do all kinds of weird stuff now in my coaching that I thought.
I will tell you, I am such a firm believer. I meditate and I believe self-care is one of the most important things that you can do. I tell people, when you're talking a solution, when you're negotiating, feel it in your body. It will tell you, things like that. And to be gentle with yourself. It's enormous to be gentle with yourself. And I talk about creating two teams for yourself. I create a professional team. So it would be like an attorney, you, myself, having all of us on a team that really works for you and as a team. The other one is that emotional team that you need. And the only rule I really put in there is, the person has to be positive that's in there. There are a lot of people that want to be on that emotional team so they can vent because they're upset about their divorce. It's not a good person to have on your team, right? If you need that positive and that uplifting person with you. So I get that. I believe that so wholeheartedly. I think it's so important.
So, and I actually tell people, it's like your mindset, your environment, and your behavior line up to being the person that you want to be, which for most people is I want to be at peace. I want to not be hurting. I want to feel independent. I want to feel confident. But I got to tell you, a lot of people, they try to help us and they actually can often hurt us as we go through the course. I mean, friends, my therapist, whom, by the way, was not a terrible therapist, but I would go in when I was going through this custody battle. This is also why I think I moved more towards coaching. I would say, this is what's going on. And I remember at one point my therapist was saying, you can hire somebody to take him out. And he was saying this in a very clear face. But I would come out of every therapy session and I would start calling my attorney, like, this isn't fair. And I should be getting this. And I should be asking for this. So it was really like hurting my healing versus helping. Yeah. And in coaching, we acknowledge the feeling, but it's like, I tell all my clients, call me. That's where people save money. Your attorney is not your friend, not your therapist. Like, call me, field all your legal questions through me, field all the emotions through me, and then it's get you back on track so that you can get through
it really is so important to use the right professional at the right time as well. I always tell people I'm not a legal expert. I'm very good at what I do on the finance side, but I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a coach from the divorce side of it, and that's very important. The other thing that I think is so important, and this is, I think, coming back to mindset a lot, is this is the first chapter in the rest of your life when you go through a divorce. So many people say, I just wish this was over. Yes, you do wish it was over, but it doesn't mean it's the end of this chapter of your life. It really sets up how you're going to be moving forward. The classic example that I give is if you are a real jerk through the process and fight everything and demeaning and all the rest, do you really think co-parenting is going to be easy moving forward? Do you think when you meet that significant other and want to go away for a weekend and it's your weekend to have the children, how accommodating is that other spouse going to be? It really sets up so much moving forward, and that's something that you need to think about. And I work from a prioritize, organize, simplify methodology. And when I look at prioritizing, it's not just for right now. It's the long term. You want to know what your priorities are that I think are so important for you as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of ways that you can look at it, obviously. And as a therapist, you're approaching things from one direction or one approach. As a coach, you coming from a very different approach. Mm-hmm. How do you, I guess, what is the difference between coaching and therapy? And then the other question I'm going to ask you to address with this is, I'm sure you use the two together because it's kind of ingrained in you, both of them. How do you use them together and help people move forward with the two approaches? A lot of questions in one. Sorry.
So in general, therapy is typically around, here's where I am today, and this is why I'm here. How did I get there? Like, what's connected to my past? What's connected to my family, my upbringing that's brought me to this point? And coaching at the most basic level is really about where do you want to be? I mean, one of the first steps I'm doing with all my clients is who do you want to be post-divorce? Because a lot of people are stuck in that hypervigilance of the divorce process and they haven't at all thought of that. And then when we can formulate something, whether it's visual or mentally or writing it down, it gives you a star to sort of direct your ship towards.
Yeah.
Right. And if part of that star is that I'm co-parenting without conflict and we have flexibility back and forth, then we have to make sure that we're really, all of our behavior is adding up to that. I do both because I tend to dip a little bit into the past because I do think when people are really traumatized and triggered through their divorce process, often it's restirring up traumas and triggers from their childhood. And so, some of it is teasing that apart. Like, is this about your parents' divorce? Is this about how you were feeling at 15 when your parents divorced? Or is this about what's going on for you today? Is this about your narcissistic parent, or is this about your narcissistic soon-to-be ex? Like, because I think that's really important for people to be able to decipher those out.
I think that's huge. And again, coming back to using the right professional for the right thing, so I've heard people say to me when I bring up using a divorce coach, they'll say, I got a therapist, I don't need a divorce coach. Or they'll feel a little frustrated because they're working with a therapist, let's say, but they're still in this fog of what's going on in their divorce. They have no idea what's going on, where they're going, how to navigate it, and understanding that there's a very different role with your therapist and what they help you through and what your divorce coach is going to help you through. Sometimes you do need both. Some people don't, some people do, but understanding, because the last thing you want to do is get frustrated because you think you're using a professional for something and you're getting nowhere on that, and that's the wrong professional, right? So
and I will tell you the honest to goodness truth. I don't think coaching is really for somebody who is able to observe themselves and know that they can do better, right? Or know that they want something better for themselves. And honestly, it's nobody's fault, but some people just aren't ready for that. They're just not there yet. And that's okay. And some of my folks come in and they just do my support group, which is 8 weeks versus doing the one-on-one coaching. And because that's a start into kind of seeing how the coaching works. And then they work with the therapist to get ready to come into more coaching kind of work.
So that actually leads me to a question, because people need to understand, obviously, when they work with a coach, whether it's a financial coach like myself, whether it's a divorce coach, whomever they're working with, they do need to put the time in, they do need to put the effort in, they do need to understand that growth can be uncomfortable sometimes. And it's very possible somebody needs coaching. However, they themselves are not ready for it, maybe, So what have you found are kind of crucial ideas that someone really needs to embrace for coaching to be beneficial?
To me, it's well, here's the thing. I also think this is a part of moving from the person who's reacting to what's going on around you to the person who's creating your life. I think those are two different stances.
Right.
So really, I think coaching is for somebody who is actively and with intention wanting to create a new life for themselves. So that's the most basic level. And, I know I seem very sweet here today, but I work with both men and women too, by the way. But, sometimes it's really, I have to point out to my clients, like, that's self-sabotaging behavior. How is that going to help your divorce process? Or, do you really need to fight about that? Like, is it worth it? I had one client who was coming in and she said, my soon-to-be ex is going around the neighborhood telling everyone he makes $20,000 more a year than what he actually reported on the divorce paperwork. I'm going to hire a business valuator. And I took out a calculator and I said, okay, let's look at the numbers here. Is this really worth fighting over?
Right.
Like, what are you going to get in your child support that's worth this amount of heartache and money?
Absolutely.
And some people aren't ready to hear that.
No, they're not. And, they do. You're right. They'll fight, they'll spend $5,000 on $1,000 problem kind of thing, which really makes no sense. Or they try to prove it that they're right, but there is no right or wrong in a situation sometimes as well. So I completely get that. I'm going to sneak a question in on one of your videos.
Okay.
I did mention there's a lot. I did mention we're going to come back to one. You mentioned that you created a program around the 6 biggest mistakes, or avoiding the 6 biggest mistakes. You mentioned how you probably did every single one of them about 100 times, which, don't get me wrong, I think I am right there with you. I probably did every single one of them as well. Can you talk a little bit about that, just to give people more of a sense again of kind of the things that you might be able to help them with?
You mean as far as what the mistakes actually are?
Take a couple and,
There's so many. Again, like I was saying before, I think managing expectations is huge getting through the divorce process, Yeah. A lot of my folks, they come in and we have our first session. They're like, hey, it's like telling me, they're like, this is how my divorce is going to go down. And they start telling me how much they're going to get in child support, what's going to happen to the soon-to-be ex. And I'm like, we don't actually know any of that. And but my neighbor, her divorce went that way. His divorce went, no. So some of it is managing some expectation. And a lot of that is just educating on what the actual divorce process is.
Right.
Because it's often not what people seem to think it is in their mind.
There's a lot of differences between reality and what's going on in people's minds. And, it's funny you say about, people referring to other people's. It's important to learn what other people do. It's important to get ideas, because you can be very creative. I always say to people, it doesn't have to be 50-50 down the middle. And they look at me, they're like, what do you mean it doesn't have to be? I'm like, well, You have a home, right? Yes. Okay, who's getting the left side? Who's getting the right side? It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So you can get very creative in how you split your assets. And that's one of the things I work with people on. But I think it's so important that people understand as well. You live in a neighborhood. Generally, your house and the house next door looks the same, and you drive similar cars, and you probably have similar amount of kids, and your divorce is 100% different because your values and your priorities and your goals and your spending habits and your everything else are different to your neighbors. And so really understanding, it's nice to learn and grow from other people and learn what they say, but it's so much more important to put it into the perspective of who you are, what your goals are. And that's one of the things that I think is so important in working with people like us is if you've never thought about your goals, we can help you create those goals or create what you want that, future to look like, whether it's emotionally, financially, whatever it might look like. And I think that's just vitally important because you're not at your best when you're in this stressful situation. Sometimes you need that objective view and that person to help you walk through those things in an objective manner.
Right. And nobody is. I mean, in divorce, everything in your life is thrown up in the air, including your most basic needs, which is a shelter over your head. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
And parenting. I mean, that comes with tons of emotion. So I think even the most sane person goes into, I call it panic mode, hypervigilant mode, divorce fog. There's a lot of connection between people. I hate to say this, but it's true. People getting into car accidents, people having trouble at their job, people forgetting to show up for meetings when they're going through a divorce because their brain is just trying to process so much. So there's the logistical, legal things and the division of assets. And then there's the emotional grief that goes along with all that as well. So it's a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, one of the mistakes I think are pretty, the most basic one is just being driven by emotion. But I think, throwing in the towel is one of the most common. People get so tired of going through the process, particularly with COVID. The courts are all backed up. So they're willing to sign off on any old agreement. I think I've seen a lot of, I have a new relationship. I met this great person on Match. They like my kids. I'm just going to give the other party everything because I'm moving into this new relationship and the stats aren't really great on those relations, so it's that. I think it's giving all the power to your legal representative and not questioning, if you have a shark attorney and they're going to go for 13 and you're okay with 9, like, why don't you talk to your attorney about, being okay with the 9,
And that's a hugely important, point. It's really your responsibility to communicate your needs and wants through it. Now, you got to be reasonable. You can't say I want 90% of everything. You have to be reasonable, but you have an advocate and you have more than one potentially, depending on how you build your team, but you have an advocate, let's say, in your attorney. And if they don't really know what you want and what you're striving for, that's an issue that they can't really address to their best ability. And to take it one step further, when I work with people on their priorities, I ask them to list out, and I've got a worksheet that works with their priorities. And then I say to them, okay, let's do the same exercise. Pretend you are your spouse, because now you're identifying what you can use to negotiate, but you also can now communicate really effectively as to your attorney where those hard negotiations are going to happen and help them help you, so to speak, which is vitally important because it ultimately is your responsibility and ultimately you got to live with the results. Your attorney, your divorce coach, your financial coach doesn't.
Absolutely.
That's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's a lot. I think personalizing, I always tell people, hey, listen, you're going to get that here in Massachusetts. We get ready for a 4-way meeting. It's our attempt at mediating. And I tell my clients, I'm like, you're going to get the first draft of the agreement from the opposing counsel and you're not going to like it, because that's usually when I get a phone call. It's like, oh my gosh, Kat, you can't believe what they're asking. Can you blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's a first draft, like, don't personalize it. It's not, doesn't mean this is what's going to happen at the end of the process. Like, we'll be okay.
And I'll say, I am a trained mediator. And one of the things that always shocks people when I try to coach them a little bit for their mediation is I tell them that the job of the mediator is not to come to a solution. And they think that's, they're going to go to mediation. The mediator is going to suggest all these wonderful things. They're all going to love it. They're all going to walk out happy. And that's not the goal of the mediator. The mediator's whole goal is to facilitate a healthy discussion to get you guys to create a solution. Now, if you know what your priorities are and you know what your goals are, it's much easier for you to know what to negotiate towards, right? Which becomes very important. But if you don't come to a solution, but you had a great discussion for 8 hours that day through mediation, the mediator's actually done their job for the most part.
Yeah.
And people really need to understand not just what they want, but obviously how does the process work that they ultimately get to the end of the process of a divorce so that they can move on with their lives and not be kind of left in limbo, or they look back and go, I don't know what just happened. That's the last thing you want as well. So I wish we had more time. We got to wrap this up, but I know the shows tend to go so quick.
I could talk to you forever because we're both very chatty.
Yeah, and it's like you think, oh, we got like 40 plus minutes. It's going to be great. Oh, we're going to, and sometimes you think, how am I going to fill that time? And then before you know it, you've got 6 more questions that you want. So I am going to want you back on so that we can cover the other 6 or 7 questions that I have. But Kat, before we go, I'm going to ask if you can just share again how people can get in touch with you, and obviously go to Kat's website, because I think there's a lot of valuable stuff, even just looking at the website and the videos and things like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the website is CatBlakeCDC.com, stands for Certified Divorce Coach. That's one way to reach me. I'm on Facebook at Catherine Blake. I have lots of free resources there and videos that you can watch. On Facebook, we have a private Facebook group. It's for women. We have 280 women in there called Diva Your Divorce. That's also another resource. A lot of the women get in there and they can ask questions in a confidential space. So yeah, but my website has all of my there's different levels of programming. I have an online class, which basically tells you how to get through the legal process of divorce. I run different groups. I've actually been moving into doing some dating coaching. I actually just opened a matchmaking service for folks.
Wow.
First called Swoon Matches. So yeah, I'm really and maybe doing a little bit too much. I might have a little ADD, but I'm trying to help people through all stages of their divorce and their divorce recovery.
That's amazing and so desperately needed, because I think especially you've been, so to speak, out of the dating world for 20 years, and it's not the same dating world by any means. Having somebody to help you with that is not a bad thing at all. But I appreciate you shedding light and sharing your insights, Kat. Personal growth, going through a divorce, things like that are not easy. They're quite difficult and very scary for some as well. So put that on top of, potentially going through an abusive relationship or an experience like that. It becomes that much harder, and sometimes definitely kind of need that gentle but firm hand of somebody guiding you who can be objective and working with you as well. I am Hirsch Serman, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Please do reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. You can reach out to me with questions, or if you want, I can relay them to Kat, our guest today, talking about mindset matters. And I look forward to you joining me on the next show in a couple weeks. And thank you so much, Kat. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.